Hi, my name is Tom. I'm the host of The Impact Billionaires. And I started this podcast because I have a life goal of impacting 1 billion people's lives positively. And if you are, just like me, looking to make a dent in this universe, leave a mark, I invite you to subscribe to this podcast. I will bring on guests who have the mindset and capabilities to become, or already are, what I call impact billionaires. Together with them, I'll explore in depth what it would take to impact 1 billion people's lives positively. We'll dive in what today's biggest challenges are and how we could go about solving those. What tools and resources we have available that can help with our mission. In short, we'll ask big questions, come up with big ideas so we can have big impact. Episodes air every 2 weeks and are available on all streaming platforms. The Impact Billionaires. What does it take to impact 1 billion people's lives positively? Hi, and welcome to the very first deep dive episode of The Impact Billionaires. Before we do dive deeper, let me start by thanking you for your patience. Because honestly, to tell you the truth, I thought I would have the rhythm of this content creation down by now. Turns out I don't yet. I'm working on it pretty solidly. Because yeah, I think I promised you an episode every 2 weeks and it's been 4 months since the last episode. Anyway, it was the first one, but I think I should be able to get the rhythm in now. So again, with that, thank you. But I'm super glad you're here today with me because we're going to be exploring a very interesting idea that came up during the very first episode of The Impact Billionaires with Dave Erasmus. And I really do hope it's going to change your thinking forever, as it did mine, exploring this topic further. We're going to be talking, as the title might give away, about the economics of giving. And so to give you some context about the format as well, or what the point is of these shorter episodes versus the longer, the idea is to start with an interview with an aspiring or an already accomplished impact billionaire. And in an interview, you talk about a lot of different things. And so what I want to do in these episodes, piggybacking off those conversations, is to pick a topic that came up during that conversation and dive deeper into it. So we can really start to internalize these things as tools that we start to use towards impacting 1 billion people's lives. And so today that topic is going to be, as I said, the economy of giving and that whole mindset behind the economy of giving and how that can help us reason as impact billionaires within an impact mentality. You'll see what I'm talking about. But before we do that, I'm going to roll you the clip from the episode with Dave Erasmus where we spoke about, or actually Dave spoke really eloquently about the economy of giving. So I'm first going to roll that clip now.
Love doesn't work like power, because if you have this much power and you give it away, you end up with no power. If you have this much love and you give it away, it just multiplies. It's just viral and it just continues. You still have that love and you've given it away. And it's that both and world you're talking about. Now you have also that love and you can give it away and hold it as well, which is just mental. That the mathematics and the economics of love and of the economy of giving completely transcend the homo economicus rational man model that we have for humans, which is why I cannot believe that humans are in their nature rational. I think they are beautifully irrational and exponentially creative. And that's what makes this whole thing so fucking exciting.
So the mathematics and the economics of love completely transcend the homo economicus rational man model we have for humans. When Dave was speaking about this during our episode, I remember getting so excited because it felt like he was voicing parts of the future that I dream of. A future of abundance mindset, positive sum games and giving, in contrast to our current scarcity mindset, mostly zero sum games and getting mentalities. Is it really that irrational to give, or is there a way of looking at the world where giving makes more sense than getting? To me, it's clear that this question is bigger than one single answer can even pretend to cover in a 10-minute deep dive episode. During research for this episode, I uncovered a lot of trends that support this core idea of us living in a time where a focus on giving is more economically interesting than getting, as even for the economy as a whole, but also for individuals. So today I will attempt to illustrate this with a set of concrete examples that show clear characteristics of either the giving versus the getting economy. And so the clear examples I want to discuss today is how open source versus patents are two ways of enabling innovation and economic growth, and how they are completely reflecting these different mindsets, and how we can like recognize these different characteristics or giving versus the getting economy. So it turns out a lot of value in our modern world is already generated by products of the giving economy. So open source projects drive a lot, and I do mean a lot, of economic growth already today. And so this is a very interesting one to look at, because again, chances are you are the benefactor of many of the open source projects throughout your day. A lot of the internet runs on open source projects. A lot of companies use open source projects in their own offering. And before I dive deeper, for those of you who don't know what open source projects are, like, let me really quickly explain here for a second. So open source is defined as software for which the original source code is made freely available and may be redistributed and modified. Normally what people or companies would do, with that scarcity mindset, is they would protect the access to the code they wrote, because they put in a lot of time and effort, and they would make sure that you would pay if you wanted to use their code and their programs. What you do in open source is you do the opposite. In open source, you allow anybody to use your code, to copy your code, use it, modify it, use it in a different form. Anything goes. And that is actually really a perfect example of what Dave spoke about as the giving economy, in the sense of, like, I give you something, now we both have something, and everybody grows from that. And that something becomes even bigger and has even more impact. It's really a positive sum game. And so you might be thinking, but Tom, what about the countless hours these people have been putting in encoding these programs without getting paid? Don't they have families? How are they going to, feed their children? How are they going to feed them code? What about the bills that they need to pay? And I would say absolutely, they should be getting paid. But I think exactly, like, for example, open source in and of itself already shows that this homo economicus rational model man might not be so accurate. And so what I think is interesting to reflect on here is, why are these people doing it exactly? What are they feeding their kids with in the end? And yes, these people are putting a lot of time in without getting paid directly. But what we do see is, at the same time, they're not completely doing this self-sacrificially, because in the end, some way or another, they do have families dependent on them. So it turns out these people are getting paid if you expand your notion of capital. So that's a core idea of this economy of giving. Is our first reflection, and I'm sure you had this reflection while listening to it, is, but how are these people getting paid? And when we speak about getting paid, we speak about financial capital. But again, that's in our getting economy mindset, because that's the whole point of that system, of that whole way of thinking, is how are we going to get money? How are you going to get paid? And so there's a big focus on that very scarcity-based capital that induces that getting mindset, because everything centers around how to get that financial capital. In a giving economy, we need to look at all the different forms of capital, such as social capital, environmental capital, intellectual capital, and also financial capital, of course, and how they keep each other balanced. Let me take that a little more concrete as to how, in the end, these people are able to feed their families. So what ends up happening for people who start useful open source project is they are obviously seen as the ones with the deepest knowledge on that technology. Their intellectual capital on this project is the highest in the market. So as more and more companies and entities start to run and adopt the open source projects because of the value they generate for free, companies run into challenges that require deep understanding of the open source project. And that's how the people that gave their time to this project, that was born from, that giving mindset, get paid eventually. This is true for anyone who puts in the time to make meaningful contributions to that project. So that means that this initial project is now creating value for exponentially more people, as it would have if the initiator would have kept the code protected or waited for somebody to pay them to finally build this project. So contrast that with patents. Patents are a more scarcity-based mechanism set up to induce innovation, as they are meant for the innovator who is granted the patent to recoup the time and money they put in researching the innovation. So here, one inventor or entity is empowered to guide the development of their invention for X amount of years. And so the actual impact the innovation can have depends on the ability of the entity behind it to coordinate its distribution and further development, significantly reducing the chance for actual impact at scale. So the amount of people benefiting from this setup is drastically lower in the name of incentivizing that innovation. So to kind of recap that, and what very concretely what I mean by that is that in that open source, I give you something and now we both have something, and that something grows even bigger. In an innovation or like a patent setting, what ends up happening is that there's one person that gets something, they're like, hey, I have something cool. If you want it, you'll have to pay me so that I can get the time back that I put into it, which again makes sense if you look at it from a purely financial point of view. But if you expand your view of the different forms of capital, all of a sudden this makes a whole lot less sense. And so you might be like, okay, all right, Tom, I get it. This is cool. I get the idea. This makes sense. Makes sense for code, because in the end, for code, the only thing you need is a computer and the ability to write code. What about for big machines, right? Like where the initial capital investment, financial capital investments are way bigger. For example, a car. Tesla, who are now viewed as the most valuable car maker in the world and are, you know, active in one of the most capital intensive industries in the world, have completely open sourced all of their patents. So any established car maker or competing startup can use the insights that they as Tesla have. So why would Tesla do this? Again, it's to help other forms of capital flood in the market they're creating. So Tesla gave something, and now all car makers have something, and that something is growing even bigger, which is the electric vehicle market. And so Tesla is trying to play that positive sum game of establishing a sustainable mode of transport. And before Tesla, few car manufacturers were, you know, making electric cars. So today there's not one car manufacturer not working on their electric cars or electrifying their current lineup. And again, that's growing the overall market for electric vehicles. But not only like the market financially, there's more people, more engineers that are working on problems related to electric vehicles, battery technology advances. Again, people want electric cars not only because it's cool, because it's becoming cheaper, because more work is being put in it. So there's a whole bunch of effects that happen from taking a bigger approach or a bigger view than solely the financial capital. But in the end, it just makes the pie bigger for everyone. And that's the whole point of this getting versus giving mentality, is the end result difference between patents and open source movements is a difference between a wave helping a couple of boats escape low tide versus making sure you're lifting the tide with all boats. And so what I want to point out here, though, however, is that the giving versus the getting economy are not like perpendicular opposite. The giving economy is just an expanded view of the very narrow view that we've had in, you know, this 20th century rational homo economicus man that is shifting into what Dave was speaking about as well, of what we actually are. Like as human beings, we are beautifully irrational. We give. And it's not necessarily irrational, even if you look at it, if you just expand the view, it's taking a more holistic view, a more holistic approach, looking at it not from that very scarce mindset, but really from that abundance mindset, and looking at, okay, how can we create something that helps everybody and has way bigger impact, which is what we're all about here at the Impact Billionaires. A great framework that illustrates that even better than I could do here as well. And again, we only have 10 minutes here, but if these kind of topics triggered you, I highly recommend as well reading Donut Economics. I think I'm going to do a complete episode on the book, but in the meantime, absolutely, that's something you should definitely dive deeper on as well. And yeah, open source definitely is a beautiful example of that giving economy and how that's already working, and really fundamentally demonstrating the difference between that scarcity versus, you know, the abundance-based approach. And especially for us as aspiring impact billionaires, open source and that giving economy should be top of mind, because if we are to have massive impact, we can't be restricted to the current economical thinking of needing to rely solely on financial capital. That will not lead to massive impact. That's pretty clear. That being said, like these incentives will for sure still be useful. Again, I think the giving economy is just an expanded view of what our economy should really be about. I'm not, you know, saying that patents don't have their use. However, the challenge again here is that it's with those limited approaches, its impact really largely depends on the innovator's ability to distribute the innovation and not necessarily on, again, creating a tide that lifts all boats. All right, so I think we all get the idea now of what the impact of giving could look like, and concretely, and how it's really, you know, shifting. And I think to bring it all together, it comes down to this idea of moving from zero-sum game thinking to positive game thinking. And the way we can do that is by taking into account like those different forms of capital and not necessarily just looking at that one form of capital and trying to optimize for one form of capital, but realizing that if a market or a product is to create value, there needs to be a market created for it that can't just be dependent on financial dynamics. There are intellectual dynamics, there are social dynamics. All these different dynamics that we today call externalities need to be embedded more centrally into our economic thinking. And if we do that, giving starts making the most sense from an individual perspective too. Because in the end, we all want to live happy, wealthy, balanced lives, and money is just one aspect of that. And the idea here is that for the very first time in human history, we have the technological capacity to create a continuously rising tide for all these boats instead of just creating small waves here and there. All right, so what can you do today to start adopting this giving economy mentality? And a key question that I like to ask myself after having gone through all this diving deeper is this. I think the key of a scarcity versus an abundance mindset, of getting versus giving, a key question that I use in my daily life that guides me daily is, how can I become the source of what I'm trying to get? This means that concretely that, for example, when I'm feeling down, instead of looking for someone to cheer me up with a compliment or a joke or some good news, I text or call somebody just to give them a compliment. Because by giving, we both get to get as opposed to just me getting. This is actually also one of the reasons I started the Impact Billionaires, as I was looking for a community of big thinkers wanting to dive deep into what it takes to have big impact. So I tried to become the source of that. And so I think the great thing with that is that we have exponential tools at our fingertips that are more often than not allow us to become the source of what we are trying to get. And if everybody starts playing that game, we are supercharging our expanded economy views into this overwhelming positive sum game. And if that is not big impact stuff, then I genuinely don't know what is. Yeah. I want to just make sure that I'm drilling that down in clearly, is that I really believe that is a key. If you can ask yourself, like, how can I become the source of what I'm trying to get? All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of dynamics within those different capitals that are set in motion. So yeah, I think that is the big question I want to leave you with here is, how can you become the source of what you're trying to get? And feel free to message us, send me an email at tom@theimpactbillionaires.com, or go online into our community and let us know, how are you going to become the source of what you're trying to get? How can somebody else help you become the source of what you're trying to get? And so if we all move from that getting to that giving mentality, I think, big impact that's a first big step that we need to take to be able to get to that big impact. All right, and with that, I want to end this deep dive episode. And so feel free to, follow us on all the social media, on LinkedIn, Twitter, on Facebook. And then there's also obviously like the email list that you can jump on, where I try to share all the interesting things that I come across as well when it comes to impact. You could do that at just theimpactbillionaires.com. Yeah, with that, talk to you soon. Bye.